Hello, good evening. I am going live on the Organic Education Facebook page. Good evening to you all. I'm hoping that a few people might be able to tune in live and join me, but if not, maybe you're watching this back on the replay. So welcome. And if you are there live watching this evening, please do drop a hello in the comments so I know that you're there and that you can see and hear me. It's always helpful rather than speaking into a void. Sometimes there is a little bit of a delay on the comments, but do feel free to put your comments and questions there into the chat. Hi Claire, thank you for commenting so I know that you can see and hear me. Great that you could join me. Yeah, so tonight our topic is socialization without schooling, a different kind of community. And I decided to look at this topic tonight because it is still the number one question that home educators tend to be asked by people who don't really know a lot about home ed. And so it can be a concern and a worry if you're kind of starting out and people continue to ask you this question. So I thought it would be good to unpack it a little bit this evening. And it's a funny one, isn't it? Because, you know, people are far more interested in my children's socialization than their education, usually. Hi, Fadzai. Good to see you there. Thanks for saying hello. I can see a few people joining in, so that's lovely. Welcome. If you're new to this page, my name is Alice Kimasia, and my husband, Krish, and I have been home educating our 4 sons outside of school for almost 12 years now. The boys are now 19, 18, 15 and 9, and the younger 2 have never been to school. So on this page, I talk about learning outside of school, and tonight about socialization outside of school. I think that people think of socialization happening inside schools, but that is not always a positive experience. The socialization in school is not always a positive thing, as the article that I posted on the page earlier today shows about children's experience of sexual harassment in schools. And I think maybe when children go into school, it's somehow easier in that parents kind of assume that socialization is happening because they're amongst other people all day long, and it perhaps doesn't require as much thought as the idea of children being outside of school. So we're going to unpack these ideas a little bit tonight and think about different kinds of community and the different needs that we all have from community, and the kind of differing forms that might take. So we're going to be thinking outside the box a little bit, which is always something I like to do, and thinking outside the schooling box. Okay, yeah, do put any questions you have, please, in the chat so I can try and cover them during the course of the next hour. Claire says we've been considering setting up our own local group, so we'd love to hear about your experience. Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my experience over the past decade in this area tonight, Claire. I've always said when I'm talking to people about home education, particularly when I've been leading workshops and things, find community. It's really important. And if it doesn't exist near you, then build it. So yeah, we'll look tonight at how that can happen and how we can help make it happen. Oh, Rachel's there too. Hi, Rachel. Great. So yeah, share your own experiences too in the chat, because it always encourages and inspires other people, particularly new home educators who might be tuning in for some inspiration and ideas. So I remember as a new home educator back at the beginning of 2010, jumping from the bandwagon into the unknown, really, of home education, and not really knowing anybody who was doing it at that time. Hi, Jackie. And so I was looking looking for new community. And I suppose we kind of have our antenna up, don't we, for people around us who are maybe doing similar, and we're looking for new ways of doing community. And at that time, it involved really what I was advised to do was to join Education Otherwise, which was an organisation that you signed up to and became a member of. And they sent me a paper pamphlet with kind of listings in it of other people who were home educating who'd given permission for their details to be shared. And it seems so old-fashioned now, doesn't it? Like, I suppose it wasn't that long ago, but this was before the days of social media, the wonders of online connectivity, really. And there were kind of email groups that you could join, but it was all really quite old-fashioned. But through the Education Otherwise newsletter, I found my local home education groups. Now, of course, these are much, much easier to find online. And if you are new, it's really worth looking for networks such as Home Education and then the name of your city, or Home Education and then the name of your county. And you'll often find that way local groups that you can plug into. And it's kind of like diving into a subculture, and you find all these amazing opportunities and lots of things going on. But at that time, going back, my groups were not really very local. We were living at that time in rural Staffordshire. Well, we were in a town, but we were amongst kind of villages, and people were quite scattered. So we had to travel to our nearest home education group meetup. It was about a half-hour drive in Stafford. And that was the way that we began to connect with the local community. And to make connections with other families. My nearest home educator back then turned out to be a lady named Harriet Patterson, who some of you might be familiar with because she did a wonderful piece of research and wrote a book about how children learn to read outside of school. And she had been unschooling her 3 children for some years. And so my first contact with a real life local home educator was having a cup of tea with Harriet Patterson in her kitchen, which I always have fond memories of. And I remember she was really excited for my boys at the prospect of us embarking on our home education journey. And she was very encouraging. And she took quite an autonomous approach, unstructured approach to her children's learning, which inspired me. And so, yeah, it's a great way to just connect with people and to begin to explore how you might want to approach your home education by talking to different people and seeing how that looks in other people's families, and exploring different groups. And there are so many different home ed groups these days, and there are groups with different formats and different setups. There'll be groups that have more or less structure and that are perhaps more organized, or just more kind of play-based and informal. So it really depends kind of what you want from a group, and what you're kind of adding into your week by attending groups like that. But they are great places to initially make connections and meet people. And we found that our local group, which was in Stafford, had quite a varied programme of activities going on. It was quite well organised. There were lots of opportunities, but it was quite relaxed and informal and play-based. And so it was good for the boys at that point to just enjoy meeting up and playing with other home educated children. And it was a good place to get to know some other local families. And from there, we found opportunities to get involved in smaller kind of like-minded groups. So we found people who were a little bit closer to where we lived, who were quite like-minded in their approach to home education, who we could meet up with to do activities in a smaller group. And we also found connections to meet up for the boys to have one-on-one time with various friends that they kind of clicked and connected with. So that was the kind of way that we began to connect with other home educating families. Hi, Denise. Good that you can join me. Hi. So yeah, through those groups and the smaller connections that we made, we ended up in a collaborative group that met up at a local farm, and the farmer kindly let us make use of one of the farm buildings on a regular basis. and gave us lots of opportunities to explore and kind of do project work in various aspects on the farm. So that was a really lovely opportunity. And I remember also with the similar group of people, we were involved in some kind of project-based learning around anatomy and learning about the human body. And that was really nice because different families kind of focused on certain parts of the body. And then we had this wonderful showcase where we all presented our own findings and experiments and research on different parts of the human body. So it came together in this lovely piece of collaborative learning and showcasing. And that's really what these opportunities provide too, is the opportunity to collaborate and to learn with and alongside others and from others. I remember at that time as well, when I first took the boys out of school, I'm quite a community builder. I enjoy that, and I enjoy creating community groups. And so I was involved in an international women's group, which I had set up. And it was brilliant for the boys to be able to get involved in that, because one of the things that was really important to me, and actually one of the things that I didn't really feel they were getting in school, was exposure to diverse people and diverse cultures. And the International Women's Group was a really great way for us to be around different people, different languages, different cultures. And so we really enjoyed that, and the boys enjoyed getting involved and being a part of that, and helping in the creche with the younger children, and just being around the International Women's Group and the families who were involved in that. And then some years into our home education journey, we moved to Coventry, much bigger city in the Midlands. And so our home ed scene kind of changed completely. And the good thing about being in a city is that things are kind of more centralized. It's easier for people to kind of gather more centrally. And there are certainly loads of different opportunities and clubs and group gatherings and meetups in a city context. So it does vary, doesn't it, depending on where you live and how mobile you are, just the kind of community and opportunities that already exist or that perhaps you need to create around you. The amazing subculture that is home education continues to grow and to develop. And when I look back over the past decade, it really has changed immensely in terms of just families that are doing home education, and the opportunities that are on offer have really mushroomed and blossomed. And even through the pandemic, when you look at the way that opportunities have changed online, and the way that we've had to adapt, and the way that people have been so ingenious and creative in setting things up. There's a whole array of different opportunities now available to us as home educators online as well. So it has been a very interesting decade in terms of the development of community opportunities. Do you know, one month I was doing one of these lives and I couldn't see any of the comments that were coming in. And I was feeling like, oh, has anyone got any questions or anything? And I couldn't actually see the comments coming in. And then when I went on my organic education page later, I could see loads of people had commented, and I hadn't been able to see them on StreamYard. So I hope you're not all posting loads of questions that I can't see. I've got lots of highs, so that's good to know that there are people listening. Otherwise, I feel like I speak into the ether. So thank you. So building community, I think, as a home educator is really important. And thank you, Claire. And sometimes building community is important for our own needs, and sometimes it's important for our children's needs. And those might be different needs, and that's okay. But I think it's important to remember that both are important. Because sometimes as home educating parents, we can be very focused on our children and their needs. And it's important to recognise our own need for connectivity and community as well. Thank you, Fadzai. So we've had various kind of little exploits and experiments in building community groups over our home ed years. And I thought I would share a few tonight and maybe give you a few ideas. So one thing we did was a technology club. Now, this was something that sprung from my eldest son, Elias's interest in technology and engineering. And if you were here at the live last month, you will have heard Elias and I having a chat about his growth as a young engineer. And he was really keen to have a kind of STEM club, science, technology, engineering and maths, or a kind of tech club. And so I facilitated him really in setting that up. And it was wonderful and crazy and quite chaotic. And the interesting thing about that is that it's not something I could have done without him. And actually, when he kind of grew older and moved on to school, the tech club folded kind of naturally, because it was Elias really who was the driving force. So that was an example of a community group we built based on him, really, his need and his interest, but which I helped to facilitate. And it ended up being really enriching and beneficial for me as well, particularly in my understanding of children's learning, because we'd been to a tech club before back in Staffordshire and it was great, but Elias didn't like the fact that he needed to kind of follow instructions, because that wasn't something that wasn't the way that he liked to learn, really. He kind of liked to throw himself in and explore and be a bit more free in his exploration of things. So he wanted his tech club to kind of be more open-ended. Need to have a drink. So we tried to facilitate something where the children would come and we had a kind of a brief or a project idea, which we would give them. And there were kind of, a sort of how-to sheet, and we showed them what we were aiming for. But then we let them run with it. And often the children chose to work in pairs or perhaps in a group of 3, and a few of them would work alone. And Elias was amazing at supporting everybody in utilising tools. And obviously the parents were around, so there were plenty of adults around just to keep an eye on everything. But he was really good at facilitating the use of tools and helping everybody to be able to access the materials. And he had some really fantastic creative ideas. Yeah, Fadzai's remembering her son Denzel being part of that group and enjoying making a rocket at the tech club and then testing it out. I remember that too, Fadzai, and it was memorable. And sometimes Elias would push me to my edges because he'd want to make things that I didn't really know about. And the rockets was an interesting one because he wanted to go across and launch them on the common. And we did do that, and it was great fun. And then we were quite a sizable group with lots of adults around, and the children really enjoyed it. And we also did the rocket powered cars, which we raced on our drive and kind of marked and ended up seeing who's went the furthest. And what was interesting about the briefs was that the children really did take them in their own direction. So although they were given the same instructions, as is so often the case with human creativity, they would all come up with something so unique and different and their own kind of design. And those that wanted to could kind of develop it and push it further. So it was very open-ended, and the children often surprised me, in the depth that they would go to, and the extent to which they could push and develop the brief. And it was really wonderful. And I think it was also very beneficial to Elias to be empowered to kind of lead that and drive it and kind of explore what projects they might like to do, and be really involved in sort of leading it. And I do think that, that went on to benefit him when he went on in his engineering learning and development later and into his apprenticeship. So yeah, that was one example of something that came very much from one of my children. But it was enjoyable too for the mums, because we used to get the chance to get together and be part of it too. And then another, how old was Elias at this point? He must have been like about 13, because it was before he went on to the University Technical College, which he joined at 14. I don't know if you can remember, Fadzai, how old Denzel was. They're not too far apart in age. I think he was probably about 13, Rachel. Yeah, and they really worked well together and helped and supported each other. Yeah, it was really lovely. And they were of mixed age, which is something that I'll come on to in a little while. Yeah. And then another example I was going to share is a kind of collaboration or a community effort that came out of some project-based learning, which was about our waste and our rubbish. Rachel's asking another good question there, actually, which was, did you need any ground rules for kids or parents? We did have. It was kind of organized, but in a loose way. So we made sure that, for example, when they were using the drill or whatever, that there was only one child at that tool point with Elias at a time, and an adult as well. So we made sure that things were spaced adequately to ensure that everybody was okay. And we made sure too that when we were using tools that perhaps were a little bit more, I guess, like dangerous, like say something that was sharp, we'd make sure that was in a position where people had to come and use it on their own, the parents were around, and also that we would demonstrate really clearly how to use that tool. So yeah, so there were there were established safety rules that we made sure were clear for everybody, and we made sure that we had sufficient space for people to work together. And I can't remember how many families it was, Fadzai. Was it about like 6 families maybe? So there were quite a number of us around, but it meant too quite a number of adults. And often my husband would come home from work on that afternoon and first of all be a bit overwhelmed by the chaos of all the people, but then actually really enjoy getting involved as well. As a maths teacher, he enjoyed the kind of STEM elements of that club. So yeah, there was a lot of involvement from different parents and families as well. Yeah, so the other example I was going to give was a kind of project-based piece of learning, which was around our rubbish and our waste. And that was a project that grew from our family asking questions about what happens to the rubbish that we put in our recycle bins. And then me inviting other families to join us in a visit to our local waste facility, the local tip, which ended up taking quite a lot of organisation. And in fact, ultimately was facilitated by Elias when we went to the tip, talking to one of the men and finding our way in there to get a group visit to our waste facility, the energy to waste to energy plant in our city. And other families then joined us for that visit. And that then became the starting point for an environmental project where we looked at what happens to our rubbish and our waste. And that was a lovely project because it evolved, and it involved the different families that came on board contributing different things and different specialisms that they brought to the table. And then coincidentally, as is often the case in home ed, and it's not coincidence at all, is it? It's because we're focused on a particular area of learning or an idea, and we then notice the opportunities around that are linked to that thing. There was a big environmental conference at our local cathedral, which our group was able to get involved with, and it ended up that we presented the delegates' environmental concerns to our local MP as a group of children, and then we ended up visiting Parliament, and it was a project that kind of found a momentum of its own and rolled, and it was a lovely way again of just bringing other families together, with us to explore something and to collaborate in a and it was a good way too for the children to have the opportunity to present their work and their findings to others in our city. So that was another nice piece of community learning. Hi Kerry, I can see you've joined us. Yeah, and then the other one I wanted to share was something that came more from my own interest and from a direction that I wanted to explore, which was when I was interested in exploring child-led autonomous learning with others who were also learning in that way, which is a little bit of a paradox, because we weren't sure how we could collaboratively facilitate children's individual interests. We wanted to kind of come together and see how that looked and how that worked in community. And so I put out some feelers through Facebook to see if there were other local home educators who would be interested in a kind of learning community, who were exploring learning in that way, and who would be open to committing to learning alongside each other for a duration. And we had a meetup, us mums, it was 6 of us, to kind of hammer out what we were trying to do, what we were aiming for, what we were hoping to get out of it for ourselves and for our families, what our own particular interests were, and to see whether we felt we could make that work. And we embarked upon that learning adventure together for about 18 months. And that was really, really good and really very interesting. And a little bit like I'd seen, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Reggio Emilia approach to learning in early years, but that's an approach to education that I love. And I'm very interested in what happens if we continue to explore the Reggio Emilia principles as children grow beyond their early years, right on up through primary into secondary learning. And so a very key principle of Reggio Emilia is the importance of community. And so this was a really important experiment, really, for me to be involved in. And it was enjoyable. And what we did was, it was very fluid. So we used different community spaces. So sometimes we would meet up at somebody's house. And other times we would meet out and about in different community spaces. So we used, when it was still open, our local community library. We used a bookshop in town that's got a kind of coffee shop and is quite open to community use. Another kind of cafe in town, or we would meet out and about. We went to a local like English heritage castle. We went to various like National Trust parks. We met in the local parks. And so it depended on the weather, and a museum. And our local art gallery actually has a Reggio Emilia space that it opens up monthly for babies and preschoolers, right, for little ones. But it's a very open, play-based space with lots of interesting kind of things to explore in it. And we asked if we could bring our older group of children in. And so sometimes we would meet there. And the lady in the museum was really interested as well in what we were doing, because she had a passion for Reggio style education. So we did all kinds of things, and it depended on the weather, and it depended on who could make it, where we all were geographically, and it depended most importantly on the interests that we were pursuing as a group at that time. And what we tried to do was to keep listening to the children and listening to the conversations and listening to where their interests were, listening if somebody had visited something and that was informing their education at that point, talking to the children continually about what they wanted to do, what they wanted to explore. And I think the biggest challenge really was then choosing in which direction to take our group learning, because, you know, often one interest had to kind of prioritize over another, and the children had to learn to, you know, accept the direction of the group, which was important in our kind of journey together. And the scrap store we met as well. That was a really fun place to meet sometimes. And we do kind of creative crafts at the scrap store. So we did all kinds of stuff like that. I think probably the most successful thing we did together was to have a shared read aloud book, because we realized that that was something that I think all of our families enjoyed doing together, at home, individually in our families. And so choosing to read a common book helped us to have a kind of commonality that we could develop when we met, around the story, which I think we did a Michael Morpurgo, the one about why the whales came, because one family had been on holiday to the Scilly Isles. And so there were links, and we'd seen this amazing narwhal tusk in the local museum. And so, you know, it all kind of came together. We did use, Rachel's asking there, another really good question. Did you have any structure for making group decisions and listening to children's voice, e.g. democratic, sociocratic? Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, how I love, I don't know if many of you follow Sophie Christopher online, and her democratic learning group at the Cabin. And I've discovered her more in recent years and understood more about the democratic principles that they use in her project. And ours was somehow less structured and less formal. We did have times when we would sit together and make sure that everybody was heard, and then we had other times where we would spend quite a lot of time when we met together kind of around a table doing things together. And so we would just be listening and chatting, and we also had a big group book where each family could contribute things that they'd been doing and making, and we would ask the children a lot about what they were learning currently and what they'd like to share with us, and they would have opportunity to tell everybody things that they had been doing and learning recently. And the other thing that was really good was giving the children the opportunity to skill share, and they really loved that. In particular, I remember one of the little girls teaching me to crochet, which, believe me, was a job, because I'm all fingers and thumbs and I'm completely in awe of these people who can do amazing crochet, like my friend Fadzai, who's listening. And she was just thrilled because she was just so able at it. And I love that. I love the fact that everybody in our group, no matter the age, whether you're a parent or the youngest child, has something to teach others and to contribute. And so that was really fun. I really think it was quite informal, Rachel. I think if I was doing it again, I know more now than I even did then when we embarked upon it, in terms of perhaps being a bit better organized. It felt very experimental. But I would definitely encourage you, if you're embarking on that kind of endeavor, to go for it, because I think it's just really enriching. And I think it was very enriching for us parents as educators, to be able to explore together, and to grow together. And the mums in that group, when we had a lovely visit to a Reggio Emilia nursery where they were doing like a training session for Reggio educators, and that was amazing and inspiring, and I think informed as well the way that we approached our learning with the children. So again, that brought up all kinds of different opportunities. And I wonder, you know, for each of you in your locality and in your local communities, what skills you have that you can input and share with others, with other families, with others around you in your networks. So yeah, those are some examples of some of the things that we've kind of experimented with and been involved in over the years. But I think, you know, when we're thinking about community for us and for our children, one of the important questions to ask is what our children need. And I remember when I had what I thought was a brilliant idea to have a kind of Friday afternoon boy central meetup in our garden. I have 4 sons. At that time, they were all at home educated. And so Boy Central seemed like a brainwave to me. I had all these boys come over and we had this kind of boy play zone in our back garden. And we did it a few times, and there was me thinking, yes, brilliant. And one of my sons had to take me aside and explain to me that actually, Mum, it's a bit much. It's a bit much. And he explained to me that actually he would much prefer just to have 1 or 2 friends. Best just one friend, one-on-one, to have real quality time. And I think it was because my eldest son, that would have lit him up, made him buzz. He was really quite the socialite and would have really enjoyed that company. But for my 3rd son particularly, this was not really his idea of good community. So it very much depends on the child, doesn't it? And all of us have personality differences which determine what kind of community and social situations we enjoy. And I'm a real introvert, so I'm quite happy in my own company. And like my 3rd son, would always have much preferred to have a kind of one-on-one play date. I always had kind of one really close friend. And bigger groups can be difficult. They're not for everyone. And so, school is not the best place for all children, educationally or socially. For some, it can just be too overwhelming. It's just too much. The sensory overload is too great. There's just too much going on, too many people. And some children, of course, are subject to bullying in schools and to difficult social situations. So I think that although school socialization is kind of an assumed norm, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best or the right kind of socialization for all children. So there are other ways. There are so many other ways of socializing, aren't there? And I wonder, for you all, those of you that are with me on the live, like, where do you remember encountering friends when you were a child? I'm sure that if you were in school, as most of us probably were, you probably had friends through school. But, where else did you encounter your friends? Thinking back, like for me, I remember loving the woodcraft folk and having some really good friends through that were not in, it was a separate thing from school, which actually I found kind of nice. It was like a respite, different set of people. And I had some of my most enduring childhood friends and people that I'm still in touch with were my neighborhood friends, the people that lived on your street. I don't know what it was like where you grew up, but we used to spend quite a lot of time playing out. Yeah, Claire's got some examples there. Yeah, the children on my street were good friends. I also enjoyed the company of adults who taught me to cook and sew. Brilliant. Yes, those are good examples. Yeah, and for me, I remember too, when we'd go on holiday, I'd always meet friends on holiday, and then they'd kind of become my pen pals. And sometimes they would come and stay later. We had these enduring friendships that were started because we were on holiday together. As I was saying, in primary school, my friends were the children who lived on our street. Yeah, right? Because you'd get to play together after school. And sometimes I think those memories are so entrenched because that was when we had our free play time, right? Where we used to play out on the field and in the woods after school. We'd play football and rounders, and we had a lovely bunch of neighborhood friends. Yeah, Claire's saying it seems harder to play out on the street now. No one on our street does, although it's full of families. That's such a shame, isn't it? That children haven't got that space in the way that we remember having it when we were kids. We're actually really fortunate that they do play out on our street. And at our last house they did as well, and it's been really, really important to my boys. But yeah, sadly, I don't know whether it's to do with fears about traffic, that children don't play out in the way they did, or is it time? Like they're all just so busy doing a million clubs. I don't know. Rachel says music groups were and are my happy place. You get to know people, but also can interact through music. I love that. Yes, it's your common love for music and participating in that together that brings you together. Yeah, see all the examples we're coming up with just in this little tiny group of us here. There are certainly clubs, aren't there, that we meet people through, that our children get to meet friends and socialize through. There's our neighborhoods, there's our families, right? Don't underestimate the sibling relationships. And I know that my boys, it was lovely actually, we were on holiday in Wales last week, and it's not often now that the four of them get to hang out together, but they did last week. And they're great friends, you know, like it was really lovely, especially for my youngest son to have his three older brothers around. And I think that those years at home together do create a bond and a way of just knowing each other and being alongside each other, which is really precious. You might have larger family networks, you know, with cousins and people that they can mix with. You might be part of a faith community or other local community groups with whom you find opportunities to socialize. Claire's saying my eldest gets a lot from his sports teams. He also gets a lot from kids he has met online through similar interests. Yeah. And the next thing I had on my list was sports, because my Noah as well is very involved in community at his tennis club and has many friends there, and also mentors amongst the coaches. So that is a brilliant source of community for him. And it might be, as Rachel says, like a common interest group. For example, for some years we were involved in a community allotment, and that was a really wonderful thing to be a part of. Quite a small group of people really who were committed to it, and we've got a new community allotment project actually on the up and go, haven't we, Fadzai and Denise, who are listening in? So I'm looking forward to getting more involved in that. But it was lovely to be able to come together and work together, and learn more about growing food together. And the last project we were involved in on an allotment, again, was people of different ages, and they loved having the boys involved. So that was really good. And another one that comes to mind is a Woodcarvers Group that we discovered through a conversation with a man at a canal side kind of village fair. And he was there on the woodcarvers table representing the local woodcarving community group. And we started chatting to him, and Elias in particular was very interested in his wood carvings. And as we talked, it turned out that he was actually one of our neighbours. And if I had gone out of my front door at home, I could have looked up the street and waved and seen him at his front door. He lived that close. So that was just lovely. And he was a retired head teacher. And so we set up a little home ed woodcarvers session in his workshop, which was his garage basically. And he was amazing with the children, and he just loved being able to share his passion for wood carving with these interested young children. And then he'd give them like little projects they could go away and do. And so the boys and I used to walk up there kind of regularly after that, and they were quite involved in wood carving with him. And when we moved over to Coventry, they joined the local woodcarvers group, which was mostly comprised of older retired people who again were delighted that there were these young boys who were showing an interest in wood carving and loved sharing their passion with them. And even like they had to go to considerable lengths to change the insurance on their group so that children could attend it, and they did that because they were so keen to have the boys go along. So that was another kind of opportunity that came through the common interest of wood carving, like Rachel with her music groups, or it might be a choir, or I don't know, there's all kinds of things. Karate our boys used to do when they were younger, which brought them into social contact with lots of different people. And there are loads of benefits right, to this kind of community and to socializing in these other contexts. The biggest one, I think, is the interage and intergenerational nature of these groups. And just the importance for children of being able to learn from those who are older, and also to be part of helping look after and lead children who are younger. And I don't know what it's like for your children, but mine have always loved being around children who are a bit older. They just look up to them and they just love them showing them things and leading them. And I love seeing that at home education gatherings, is just the dynamic when you have children of different ages, who are not segregated by age in the way that schooling so often does. And certainly for my boys, their closest friends are certainly not the same age as they are. So my youngest son, Zephan, who's now 9, his best friend is nearly 13. And they first met when Zephan was 3 and this other little boy was 7. And we were having a New Year's party and his family came over and he dressed up as Darth Vader and little Zephan was dressed up and they just connected. It was like a click, despite the 4-year age difference. And they're still such friends, and they just go into this little world where they play their imaginary games with their Lego, and it's just a beautiful friendship, which I don't know, it doesn't happen the same way in school, right? Because you're kind of too grown up to play with that little person you wouldn't meet, because you're in different classes and in different parts of the school. And I think that that's what the freedom of the neighborhood gives, right? Is that lovely dynamic of interage friendships. And Noah's really started to spend a lot of time with a boy who's 3 or 4 years older than him, that he's met through his older brothers and through his youth group, and they go running together. And yes, it's just lovely. You don't have those kinds of age bands that kind of segregate people. And the other thing that's been lovely in this area for my boys is to have really great friendships with girls, because they don't have sisters, and I live with 5 men, and they've had lovely friendships with other home educating families, who have all girls, and we've been able to just hang out together, and they've just had a lovely dynamic of friendship, with various girls, and that's been so valuable and precious to me, particularly in talking to them about girls and friendships. And the other thing that I've loved is the diversity of friendships that have developed, and the intercultural nature of some of those friendships. And again, although I know we wish that our schools were perhaps more diverse than they are, often people can remain very segregated in our city. Increasingly, there are different schools for different faith groups, and I think sadly our communities are more segregated than we perhaps like to imagine. And so for me, that's really important, is that our social circles look diverse, and that the boys have diverse friendships. And again, that maybe requires a little bit more mindfulness and effort in looking at where we are and who we're engaging with, and that's important. I think it's also enriched our family, and the boys being able to engage with children and with people with diverse needs, and to recognize neurodiversity, and just the different people's needs socially, and how to respect that, and to allow space for people. And I think it's enabled them to engage positively with adults in a really confident way. And I think it's given them an expectation of being treated with respect, and a maturity which is really precious. I think that when my son Joe went to school at 14, one of his very early encounters, unfortunately, in the school environment was being shouted at by a teacher because he was heading into a classroom with a drink. And he was 14 at this point, and Joe didn't know, honestly didn't know, that he could not take the drink into that classroom. But he was actually really upset by the encounter because the teacher shouted. And Joe said, why didn't he just like say to me, hey mate, you can't take that drink in there. And I think that our children they were kind of used to being around adults in a different way, perhaps without that kind of power dynamic. And so Joe found that difficult to encounter. And in some ways, I'm kind of glad that felt difficult to him, that wasn't sort of acceptable to him, because I think children should be treated with respect. And so, yeah, I think the same thing happened when Joe went to an interview for an apprenticeship, and he was kind of being told by the person arranging the interviews, well, you just kind of have to take what you can get and be glad, be grateful that you've got anything. And Joe kind of felt like, no, that's not a good enough offer for me. Why are you talking to me like that? Like I've got nothing to offer. And I think that his experience in community and with adults who saw him differently and encouraged him, though he was young, it gave him an expectation that he should be treated with respect. And I think that's good for children, right? It's important. And I know, like with watching Elias, it was funny the other day, Elias said to me, oh, can you come and pick up some wood after work, please, in the Zafira? He needed the big boot space. So I went down to his workplace to help him load up some wood and drive it back in my car. And as we were doing that, some guys came out of the building and sort of said, oh, Elias, what you doing? And had a little chat with him. And they were older men. And then they went on their way. And Elias said to me, oh, that's the assistant and the professor and the assistant professor or something. But they were sort of chatting about mountain bikes, and Elias is just very relaxed with them. And I kind of like that, the way that we interact as human beings. Doesn't matter about our kind of age or our position, but there's a confidence about our young people, right? And a maturity with which they carry themselves and relate to people, which I think is really valuable. And I think, as they're growing up and we're having kind of ongoing conversations and we are imparting values and working things out together as we encounter issues, in relationships and friendships and community, and helping them to navigate those issues when they're younger and as they grow, we're kind of, it's a process, isn't it, of enculturation. And it's quite a powerful thing, the socialization process outside of school. So there are lots of pros to it, is what I'm trying to say, right? So when we kind of feel sometimes like we go on the defensive, I don't know why, really, because I think there's so many positives. And of course, this year with the pandemic has presented a whole other set of challenges of its own. And it's been really, really difficult and has emphasized all of our real need for relationship and for connectivity. And I want to give a big shout out to any new home educators who are joining us on the call or who might be watching on the catch up, who've perhaps started home educating during or since the pandemic and the lockdowns, and who are still kind of finding your way with this, because it has been a really exceptional time, hasn't it, for everybody. And it was kind of funny when we first went into lockdown and everybody suddenly was having to do this awful online schooling alongside their job and everything else, and it was awful. but it was kind of funny that they'd say to home educators, oh, I guess you're used to this, or nothing's changed for you. And nothing, of course, could be further from the truth, because all of our social networks too had closed down. And although we had some advantage in terms of being used to learning with our children at home and to perhaps taking a more informal approach to learning, our social connections and these networks that we have and rely on and enjoy have certainly not been what they usually are. And so if you're new to the home ed world and the home ed scene, be encouraged that there is much that normally happens and will pick up to happen again that hasn't been happening during this past year. So yeah, and I guess one of the things that we've discovered through the pandemic too is the power of online community and online connectivity. Like Claire said in her previous comment there, her son has got a lot from kids he's met online through similar interests, and our children have been able to connect through the power of technology, which has been amazing. Claire's got some more pros here, lots of pros. My eldest came out of school believing he couldn't make friends because he had experienced so much bullying. He has made stronger friends outside of school, and interestingly, none of his current friends are his age. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Claire, how different it looks. I'm really glad he's made stronger friends. That's brilliant. Yeah, so the online world has opened up, a whole different set of possibilities, and certainly the benefits of meeting like-minded friends and connecting with like-minded people online. And for us, that community this year has been the Lights On community, which I talk about quite a lot on this page. But that's been fabulous for us to connect and collaborate, and to bring momentum into our learning through what's been a really difficult year. And for me, it's been a real joy to be able to work and connect with other people who think about education in the same way that I do. It's been important for me, and therefore important for our whole family. And the boys too have been able to get involved in lots of fun online connectivity and collaboration through Lights On. And I wonder, really, when people worry about socialization, when they pose the question to us about what about their socialization, is it really a lack of opportunity for collaboration that they fear? Is that really the fear? How will your children learn to collaborate? And collaboration is one of the key 21st century skills, right? It's important for all of us. And I think about women. We lived in Turkey for some years when our big boys were small, and the women there were so connected, like they would get together to prepare food and to drink tea and just to do all kinds of things. It felt like there was more connectivity amongst them, more coming together, and we need that, right? And so I wonder for you all in your home education how you're finding that connectivity at the moment. What ways do you find it? For me, I've got a kind of small group of friends who, that's my circle, really, my kind of support group. And we have various book clubs, and we've got this allotment thing that we're working on, and we've got kind of time we meet up to drink tea and chat in the garden at the moment. And then we've got a few friends for my sons, because that is all they need to make them happy. We have a kind of regular little troop of teenage boys who come up and down our garden, fiddling around with bikes and cars. And Noah goes up to his tennis club, and Zephan's got his particular little friends that he likes to meet up with regularly. And that's what they need. That's enough for them. And then we've got our online community network through Lights On. And then we've got our local community things, which are beginning to pick up again now, just beginning to pick up. And those opportunities to meet up in local community. Then there's our family, grandparents, and our neighbours. And the boys spend a lot of time with neighbours playing out. And then their clubs, which again, it's beginning to pick up. Like the sports clubs have been going back for a while. We still haven't got our local home ed groups up and running, but things are beginning to open up again. Kerry's made a comment there. It's collaboration I worry about for my son. He only ever wants to do things one-to-one. Yeah. Is he collaborating in a one-to-one situation with just one other friend? Kerry, sometimes Elias's collaborations have just been with one friend. And he often has a particular friend at a particular time who shares a particular interest. And it can be quite an intense kind of friendship. But then when their interests move on, they just kind of go their separate ways. And then he'll have another friend who shares a particular interest in mountain biking or whatever it is. And I think that different children's needs are different. And maybe if he's collaborating in a one-to-one situation, that's enough for him, particularly at the moment, because he's still quite young, isn't he? But I wonder, our hour has gone incredibly, but I wonder what community looks like for you. And I hope this has given you some things to think about. And how might you be part of building and creating community for yourselves, for your children, maybe for others around you? Yeah. So it felt like that was an important thing to talk about tonight. I'm sorry it was late notice this week because I actually forgot it was 4th Friday already and it doesn't seem a month since I was on here last time. So thank you for joining me. And do keep, if you've got other questions about this, please do put them in the chat underneath this live, and I will come in and have a look and see if anyone's asked anything. But thank you very much for joining me live. Thank you, Rachel. Yes, I am very much an introvert, and believe me, this is me very much out of my comfort zone. But even introverts do need some community, right? Thanks for joining. And I'll see you all next month. Let me know too if there's anything particular you want me to cover, won't you, in the comments? And yeah, I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thanks for joining. Thank you. See you soon.